Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're diving into some fascinating stuff you sent us, listener. Your religious study notes on, well, becoming a better listener, specifically when it comes to sermons. We thought we'd help you unpack all those great insights.
Yeah, it's easy to just kind of zone out during a sermon, right? But it's when we actually actively listen that things get really interesting.
So true. Now, your notes focus on the Bereans from Acts 17:104 down to 12. They were known as seriously good listeners, but what made them so different? Were they just super polite or something?
It goes way deeper than just being polite. The Bible describes them as noble-minded and says they received the message with great eagerness. It's like, imagine those students who are always front row, totally engaged. They're not there just to get the notes. They actually want to learn.
They had that spiritual hunger, huh? Your notes compare that to physical hunger, a sign of being healthy. So they were spiritually fit.
Exactly, yeah. That eagerness is what made them such good listeners. But there's more. It's not just that they were like sponges soaking everything up. They actually examined the scriptures daily to see if what Paul said was true.
So they were fact-checking, like with their, ancient scrolls or something.
More than just casual fact-checking, really. The original Greek word is anakrino, which means like a deep investigation. Almost like a detective working a case, not just skimming the surface.
Wow, makes you think about how we judge sermons today, doesn't it? Your notes warn against basing it all on, the preacher's personality or how the message makes us feel.
It's so easy to get caught up in that stuff, right? The delivery, the emotions. But real discernment takes more than just feelings. I mean, a good speaker could make anything sound amazing, but if it's not true, it's like building a house on, sand.
Right, right. So how do we avoid that trap? Your notes talk about finding the key takeaway, figuring out what God wants you to do.
It's all about that personal application, right? Like there's this story about a guy who comes home from church and says the sermon was about sin. Totally missed the nuance, but hey, he got the main point. It was relevant to him.
Huh. That's great. So we got to move past just passive listening then, huh? I can't just sit there and absorb.
Absolutely. Got to engage, be able to summarize the main points, figure out how it applies to you, and then actually do something with it. That's the Berean way, and it can be pretty powerful.
Sounds challenging, but rewarding. Your notes actually give some advice for those sermons that are, a little all over the place.
We've all heard those, right? Sometimes it's the sermon, sometimes it's us, zoning out. But even then, try to find 2 or 3 main points. Pick one that speaks to you and spend the week, unpacking it. Use a Bible dictionary, a commentary, go full Berean.
So instead of just taking the teacher's word for it, we hit the library.
Exactly. It's about taking charge of your own spiritual growth. And speaking of that, your notes actually suggest something pretty bold, giving feedback to the preacher.
Wait, talk to them after the sermon. Isn't that a little, I don't know.
It might seem weird at first, but it can be so helpful. Remember, even preachers need that Berean listener sometimes. It's about respectful dialogue, helping them refine their message, and it creates a more interactive learning environment for everyone.
So we're all part of this big spiritual research project, huh? Helping each other along the way.
I like that, yeah. And speaking of research, this brings us to another key point. Memory. How do we actually remember what was said once we're out the door?
Ugh, tell me about it. I swear my brain just, forgets everything.
Happens to the best of us. The trick is making that listening active. Don't just let it wash over you, actually engage. One way is to take a few notes during the sermon.
Just jot down a few keywords or something?
Yeah, exactly. It's like making a map of the sermon in your head. Those notes become little anchors for your memory. And then when you go back and look at them later, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. That's what they were talking about.
Like a little cheat sheet for your spiritual growth. But, sometimes our minds just wander during a sermon. What about those moments when you suddenly realize you have no idea what's been said for the last 5 minutes?
Oh, I've totally been there. Don't worry about it. Happens to everyone. Instead of getting all frustrated, try this. Take a few deep breaths, bring yourself back to the moment, and try to tune back in.
Like hitting the reset button on your brain.
Exactly. And if you drift off again, just do it again. The more you practice, the easier it gets. This whole idea of being an active listener, a Berean listener, it goes beyond just you and the sermon, though.
Oh, yeah. We've been focusing on personal growth. But what happens when a whole church starts doing this? Does it change things?
Imagine, right, a church where it's not weird to ask questions, even tough ones, where people feel comfortable sharing their doubts, a place where even the leaders are open to feedback.
It'd be buzzing with energy all week long, not just on Sundays.
It becomes less about just sitting there and more about everyone, like discovering things together. The preacher's not the only one with answers. They're more like a guide. And the congregation becomes, well, seekers, all learning together.
I love that image. But realistically, not every church is going to be into this, right?
Yeah,
Some might see all this questioning as, I don't know, like a challenge to their authority.
for sure. Change can be tough, especially when you're talking about tradition. But the Berean spirit isn't about being rebellious or disrespectful. It's about really wanting to understand, to live out your faith in a genuine way.
So it's coming from a place of humility, right? Like
Yeah.
we're all in this together.
Exactly. And honestly, I think that attitude can make a church stronger. When people feel heard, when their questions matter, they're going to be more involved, more
Yes,
invested.
they own a part of it then, right? They have a stake in the journey.
Exactly. So how do we actually bring this Berean approach into our churches? Where do we even start?
Well, your notes say it starts with each of us, right? Choosing to be those active listeners,
Yeah.
asking questions, trying to understand, sharing what we learn with others.
Be the change, right? If enough people start doing it, it can shift the whole culture.
Like a ripple effect, yeah. But what about the leaders? Do they have to be on board for this to work?
Ideally, yes. If they really get behind it, model that Berean spirit themselves, it creates a space where all this can happen. It shows that questioning is good, thinking critically is valuable, and finding truth is something we do together.
It's about creating that safe space where people can explore, even challenge what they believe. A lot of it comes down to trust and respect, huh?
It's essential, and I think every church should be aiming for that, no matter what they believe.
Wow, this has been so eye-opening. I'm seeing how this Berean approach can really shake things up, not just for ourselves, but for our whole church. It's about going from just sitting there to really participating, from just believing whatever you're told to actually thinking for yourself, from being alone to learning with others.
It's a journey worth taking, for sure. And the great thing is, it doesn't have to start at the church doors.
Oh, really? So you're saying we can take this Berean mindset out into the world with us?
Absolutely. Think about it. We've been talking about listening in church, but it applies everywhere. The world's full of information, opinions. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. It's like, how do you even know what's real anymore?
And that's where that Berean mindset comes in. It's not about like checking every news story against the Bible. It's about thinking critically, questioning things, looking for evidence, getting different perspectives.
So like we're training ourselves to be Bereans in everyday life.
Yeah, exactly. We become more careful about, well, what we believe, what we listen to, thinking for ourselves, not just letting others do the thinking for us.
But how do you even start doing that? Like everything's so crazy, everyone's got an angle.
It's tough, yeah.
Yeah.
But there are some things you can do. First, know your own biases, right? We all have them, so recognize them. And then, question them.
Like, check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Something like that. Second, try to see things from different sides. Don't just listen to people you agree with. It's good to hear different viewpoints, even if they make you uncomfortable.
That's hard, though. Everyone's so loud about their opinions these days.
I know, but it's important if you want to be a well-rounded person. And third, never stop asking questions. If something doesn't make sense, don't just ignore it. Do some research, Look for facts. Talk to people who know more than you.
So we become like investigators or something, trying to piece together the truth.
Kinda, yeah. And finally, be open to changing your mind. If
Yeah.
you learn something new, be willing to, adjust your thinking.
Takes humility to admit you might be wrong, huh?
Mm.
But I guess it's all about learning and growing.
Exactly. Being a lifelong learner, always open to new information, new ideas. That's what being a Berean is all about.
Wow, this deep dive has been incredible. It's like we've been given this toolkit for life, not just for our faith, but for everything.
And the best part is, it's a journey. We're always learning, always growing.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So, listener, think about it. How will you embrace that Berean spirit? What will you investigate? Our deep dive is ending, but your exploration is just beginning.